Okay, dreamer, please.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm sure many of you have been waiting for this video. This is the part 2 of the previous video which talks about what upcoming heroes there will be in Seven Knights 2. So we actually covered 20 heroes in the previous video, but before we jump into the main content, I just need to clarify many things that have been brought up from the previous video. And first I will share with you guys 3 comments that have been left on the previous video. The first is by Shelter. He says that some of the advice that I gave was debatable, especially in terms of Shay because of the next 8-man raid and Alice. And yes, I do agree, because after looking more in-depth into the PvE side of things, I realized that Shay is going to be pretty good, and Alice as well. She's actually used in so many endgame content as well, especially for guild raid, and she has such a long-lasting effect in PvP even up to today since her release, which is about 6 months. Okay, in terms of longevity. So I think Alice won't be a very bad hero to pick up. Okay, depending on your resources, of course, at that point in time. The second comment is by Happy Buddha. He is a very experienced player in the Korea server, so you can go check out his channel if you need help for PvE, because I believe he uploads a lot of endgame content as well. So he says that you're gonna need Mercure when the raids extend beyond tier 10. And there's also something called the story path, whereby each hero, when they're released, will have additional quests and stories, scenarios for you to complete, and you get additional rewards from there. So if you don't know the hero, then you are not going to be able to do it. Of course, this is not something I would really, want to pressure players into getting, because ultimately it depends on your playstyle. If you are someone that can get a lot of rubies easily, whether it's by cash or by hard work, then yeah, if you want to go for collection's sake, go ahead. So depending on when the new raids are coming out, he could be actually released when the raids extend, and then his banner's release will actually make more sense rather than, releasing him now without the tier expansion. So that could be the plan that Netmarble Global has. And again, he also says that Len is going to be not a must-have for the Shane raid, because you also have Windigo who will be buffed to be a suppressor as well. So that is also one thing I have to clarify. So the last comment is by Youngmin Kim. He is playing the Korean server, so I believe that his advice here is going to be very valuable for everyone. He says that you will need every single hero because there is something called the account level system. I believe that is CP, if I'm not wrong. Okay, so yes, if you have additional heroes, your CP will have a greater spike because of all the added buffs that you have already unlocked, such as your divinity, heroes themselves, when you level them up or you give them additional gear sets. This will all add up to your main account CP. So basically, having more heroes will help, of course. But again, I'm going back to the point whereby it really depends on your playstyle whether you can afford to actually pull all these heroes. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult for you and you're going to pressure yourself into getting every single hero, and I don't think that is going to be a very good thing in the long run for you, okay, as a player. And then next thing is that the Legend Plus Pity banner will not guarantee the Legend Plus, yes, which I mentioned earlier in that video as well. I mentioned about the raids. So after looking into this, I realized that the Moonstone banner is really the way to go. And previously I did mention some things about not having enough rubies to pull for the L plus heroes, but in actual fact you should be saving for the Moonstones and pulling them from the Moonstone banner, which will make things a lot more efficient, and your rubies can then be used on the Masteries and the L heroes more specifically. So this will be more efficient resource allocation. And of course, you can also get the tickets from the Topaz shop, which will give you 10-time pulls on the Legendary Plus Moonstone banner as well. Okay, so these are basically the things I want to clarify. And also going back to the 20 heroes, after doing more in-depth research, I realized that there are many heroes that you need for guild raid, because I looked into guild raid, and the system for guild raid in future is gonna be the same as the system for guild war, whereby you cannot repeat heroes used. So you will need 12 heroes, 12 PvE heroes for guild raid, which is why there are some heroes that I'm gonna talk about in this video that are gonna be important as well. So these are the heroes you can use for guild raid. Okay, and I know releasing this video right now is not exactly the best thing, I think, because Chris is going to be released in global server already. So just to talk a bit more about Chris is actually a really good debuffer in future. okay, when there's more content for him to be used in. Right now, I don't see that he is gonna be very much used anywhere unless you need a strong damaging range unit, then Chris could stand up to that, okay? But he's definitely not cold set level, range dealer kind of level. He's more of a support hero, debuffer, and a secondary DPS. Okay, so if you're thinking whether to pull for him, I think these are some considerations that you need to take into account. Okay, but don't worry, he is going to come back. His banner will come back as the L banner in future. So maybe when there's more content coming out, then his existence in your inventory will make more sense. Okay, the rest of the units can also be used for guild raid, and the three that are most important are Noho, Gillahan, and Seek. They are literally the suppressors for the guild raid boss, so without them, you will not do as much damage because you can't suppress the boss and you may die. Okay, so I think these three, if you want to focus on guild raid, okay, if you're more of a PvE player or you're just a more all-rounded player, I think these three are really worth to check out. So the next thing I want to talk about is the 5 legendary plus heroes that we covered last video. Out of these 5, at this point in the Korean meta, which is 6 months, the Ruri, okay, which is the last L+, they are not used as much except for Legendary Plus Chris and Legendary Plus Ace and Rudy actually. Evan has almost fell off the current PvP meta because there are just so many other better universal heroes coming out like Karma, which we'll talk about later. Yuri has also fallen off because of Rin. Okay, even though she was used alongside Rin for a while, then other range units came out as well and Yuri just took a back step. Okay, Chris has always been in his sub meta whereby he has a death kind of meta going on and he's still really strong there, so he does have some longevity in terms of PvP utility. Rudy, you know, when he's really built out, I'm sure most of you who have Rudy have been telling me that he's not as good as he looks, okay? But I think in future, when he's really built out, you can use him in the very long run, even still up to now in PvP. Okay, even though Jave, which we'll talk about later, is also going to be a very strong tank and will likely overshadow Rudy in time to come, but some people do run Rudy and Jave together to give you a more bulky kind of PvP composition. Okay, on this note, I would like to say that in future, the PvP content, the PvP meta is going to be very legendary plus heavy. All the legendary heroes you see on this screen right now are not in the meta anymore except for Alice. Okay, these are things that you want to keep in mind. So moving on, we first have Espada. Espada is a really cool girl. Okay, she is a DPS unit, and she will be someone that increases status effect duration applied by allies by a percentage of time. She also applies single target damage, stuns, and has a chance to apply death. And if you have forgotten, death actually causes the target to lose 5% of their max HP every 5 seconds for 30 seconds, and when there's an overlapping effect that hits, the target immediately dies. Skill 2 charges to the target and deals AoE damage and has a chance to knock back. Skill 3 grants her evasion, and evasion is basically just a chance to dodge any attack. Okay, this is countered by hit probability, which if you remember from the previous video, Ace increases hit probability of all allies on his passive. Finally, on her ultimate, she does do single target huge damage and also inflicts death at 100%. So she's mainly used in PvP alongside L plus Chris to form kind of like a death team. She remained as one of the top DPS units in PvP even after 4 months of her release, but the team composition is very important for her to be good because she does allow you to increase the duration of status effects, which means she is more likely to be used in CC teams. Death teams in PvP do remain as a sub-meta even after 5 months after Espada's release, and also coupled with other heroes like Ace and Karma, they are able to hold their own in PvP. Whether to pull or not really depends on the type of team you like to use. If you want to go for a Death and CC type of team, I think Espada is worth the pull. Next up we have Jave. He is a legendary plus tank, okay? And Jave is extremely strong. For his passive, he grants himself counter attack, increases his own block rate, revives with a percentage of max HP upon death, and resets all his cooldown. So you might be wondering, what is counter attack? Counter attack basically is dealing a percentage of Jave's defense back to the attacker. That's all. Kind of like a reflect, but it's a fixed amount of reflect based on Jave's defense. Skill 1, he becomes unstoppable and deals AoE damage and burns the target. So for burn, it damages the enemy based on the percentage of their defense every second for 10 seconds and can stack up to 5 times. Skill 2, he charges to the target and deals AoE damage and has a high chance to apply taunt on himself, good for a tank like him, and burns as well. For skill 3, he increases all allies' defense and grants allies a shield equal to a percentage of their defense. For his ultimate, he becomes invincible, deals AoE damage, burns targets, removes buffs, summons a 10-meter flame zone, dealing huge damage to any enemy in sight for 10 seconds every 2 seconds. So his AoE is incredibly strong, does so many things, and basically in PvP, he is just, a ridiculous damage over time dealer. And if you were to look at his skills, he does AoE on almost every skill, so he's gonna be good in your Field Expedition and Gold Vault as well, even though I don't think many people use him there, but he's definitely a viable option. And yes, he is one of the top tanks in PvP even after 4 to 5 months of release, and he will also push Legend Ruri off the meta usage. So the two main tanks in the meta will eventually become Legend plus Jave and Legend plus Ruri. He also raises the utility of the Shay and Alice combo with Legendary plus Evan, and creates this immortal team that is very difficult to bring down due to the number of heals. And he also pairs very well with Espada and Chris in the death team, so he's so flexible as a tank unit. Okay, he can hold his own ground and deal a lot of damage over time. If you want a crazy long-lasting damaging tank unit in PvP and maybe PvE, okay, damage over time, I think Jave is definitely worth the pull. He is by no means a poor hero, so yes, I think if you have the Moonstones, then I think Jave is worth the pickup. However, next we have legendary Casper, who I personally think is one of the most important heroes to pick up. Okay, the reason why is because she is a Field Expedition damage dealer. She increases all allies' damage in Field Expedition. She also has this very unique ability that gives you additional rewards when you finish each Field Expedition round. So when this passive skill level increases, at level 1 you get 1 additional reward, at level 10 you get 3 additional rewards, and at level 20 you get 5 additional rewards. Level 20 meaning Casper is completely maxed out, okay, at level 50 I think. So that is not something that obviously many of us can get to, but over time if you build her up, it is possible. Because as you know, you'll be using her in Field Expedition a lot. Field Expedition gives you hero proficiency, which means your Casper is likely to have very high hero proficiency in a very short time. So the next 3 skills that she has are almost the same thing. Okay, basically she will do huge amount of AoE damage distributed by the number of targets hit in Field Expedition, and in Field Expedition this damage is applied a second time. Basically it's kind of like a chain attack, okay, whereby she attacks again using the same skill, something in that vein. Okay, I can't get the exact translation, but the idea is something like that. And for her ultimate, she also does huge AoE damage, same thing, and in Field Expedition has the chance to reset all her skill cooldown. So you can tell how much of a crazy, a niche skill set that she has, because she's able to reset her entire cooldown, build up her out again using the skills, reset again, and yes, your farming is going to be insanely efficient, okay, with her around. Pair her up with the Cheng we talked about in part 1 and Lina, and you just got yourself an insanely fast farming team. The reason why you want to farm incredibly fast is because in future, higher difficulty Field Expedition will require you to kill 100 enemies to complete one round. So if you can speed up this process with the attack and movement speed buffs from Cheng and Lina, you will be acquiring a huge amount of resources in a very short period of time. And I personally watched her in action while making this video, and I was really mind blown by the efficiency. So she is definitely a great hero to pick up in order to maximize your farming efficiency and also overall farming rewards. Next up we have Lee. Lee is very overshadowed, okay, because he is coming up with Rin. Lee is a universal hero. He will increase your allies' block rate, he does very basic straight line damage and reduces the target's damage dealt. He teleports to the target, deals AoE, has a chance to stun. He increases his own block efficiency and his own status effect resistance, okay, and for his ultimate, he has HP conversion. Similar to what he have in 7 Knights 1 for Lee, he was very famous for HP conversion. So he's mainly kind of like a PvP hero and maybe just few expedition because he does have AoE damage and he does have straight line damage, and not only that, when he hits a monster he will do very huge single target damage. So possible, but I won't recommend him over someone like Casper, as I mentioned just a while ago. Okay, I think he is extremely highly overshadowed, especially being a universal hero, and you know that there are other heroes that are more superior than him, like Nasra Shane, like Chris, like Fodina Eileen, and even Ace. So I don't think Lee has any spot in the meta at all, and you should completely skip him, of course. Okay, and of course alongside Lee is Rin, the goddess, the waifu, my favorite. So I won't even, I just say just pull, you have to pull for her. Why is there even any consideration? Okay, but anyway, for her passive, she does do AoE damage on all basic attacks and has a chance to blind the targets while doing basic attacks. Not only that, all her attacks will be critical, so this is something that is exactly the same as Dylan's. And if you have a Dylan's, you know how hard that will hit. And for her skill 1, she does straight line damage, pulls the targets 10 meters ahead and has a chance to blind. For her skill 2, she does AoE damage, deals additional damage to blinded heroes and removes buffs. For her skill 3, she has stealth effect, increases her own attacks and resets her cooldown of skill 1 and 2. And for her stealth effect, she cannot be targeted and also becomes immune to AoE skills. I'm not too sure if this is going to be completely accurate, but it seems to be that her stealth is a better version of what the Shane and the Miss Velvet has. Yes, because she is completely immune to AoE damage. Yeah, I'm not too sure if that's really a thing, but we shall see. Okay, and for her ultimate, she also does huge amounts of AoE damage, additional damage to blind the heroes and removes buffs. So she is most definitely a PvP hero, and for PvE I only see her as a buff remover, nothing more than that. She is really designed for PvP, and despite being a ranged unit, she is super flexible in various compositions. You can pair her up with Yuri in the double ranger comp along with Ace and probably a support like Alice, or DPS like Ming or Fodina Eileen depending on the formation of your choice. She can also be paired in the semi-tank team with Jave, Rudy, Alice and Shane or Shane. She can also be used in the hyper-offensive comp with Espada, Shane and Legendary plus Evan. She can also be used in a CC team with the Death Chris and Espada, who will prolong her blind duration. So she can be used in so many different settings depending on what you love. And as I said, do you still need to consider to pull her or not? Pull for her. Next up, we have Ruri. So Ruri is a budget co-set. Okay, straight up, if you just look at her skill set, she is a budget co-set. She deals a lot of huge single target damage, okay, and she is a PvE damage dealer. Though she is designed as a single target range damage dealer, she does not out damage co-set in the short run because you have to build her out, and maybe by that time when she comes out, your co-set could be already built out. Okay, so yes, definitely in the short run, you are not going to have a very strong Ruri to overtake your co-set unless you don't have a co-set at that point. She is used in Guild Raid as a ranged DPS, and you may be thinking, so what about co-set? As I mentioned, you cannot repeat heroes in Guild Raid, just like Guild War. So co-set will be used in one raid and Ruri will be used in another alongside Noho and Legendary Chris. Okay, so she's considered the entry level co-set, has shorter cooldown and hence faster charging of ultimate, so she's definitely not a bad PvE range DPS to have if you still don't have a co-set. And also if you want to do well for Guild Raid and not face the problem of having not enough heroes, I think Ruri is definitely someone you want to own. Next up, we have Bai Jiao. Bai Jiao is again another universal hero designed for PvP. He increases his own hit probability every 1000 attack stats. He also increases duration of status effects cast by him. In skill 1, he becomes unstoppable, deals AoE damage and has a chance to mutate, and mutation is whereby you incapacitate the enemy and also decrease their defense. And in skill 2, he does straight line damage, has a chance to knock back. In skill 3, he does damage over time every second for 3 seconds, summons a dark zone that pulls in the target, and his ultimate also does the same thing, summons a dark zone that causes mutation. He is considered one of the top tier universal heroes even after 3 months after his launch. So at launch, he forms a very powerful meta comp with Legendary plus Rudy or Jave, Karma, and Legendary Plus Shane using the tactical formation. And 3 months later after Teal's release, this team kind of becomes the sub-meta, okay, and he's also feasible to be used with other Universal and or CC comps as well. So overall, I think he's a high utility unit with the pooling effect. Okay, I've seen that in action and I think it's really nice to have a pooling unit in PvP, because this allows your damage dealers to, AoE damage dealers, to maximize the damage output at that point. And at this point in the game, when Bai Jiao is released, there are going to be many other very strong heroes about to come out. So I would say it is wise to narrow down the heroes that you want based on the team comp that you are using, okay, and decide if the hero is going to be feasible for your type of play. Okay, that is something you will want to keep in mind. Along with Bai Jiao, we are going to have Karma. Karma is yet again a very strong Legendary Plus unit that is so flexible. He increases all allies' crit hit resistance and he gives himself guaranteed block when attacked. He teleports to the target, deals AoE damage, has a chance to knock back and increase cooldown of the target. In skill 2 he becomes unstoppable, deals AoE damage, remove buffs, and this attack will have a guaranteed hit. Okay, so evasion doesn't work against this. And in skill 3 he increases allies' pull resistance, contradicting to Bai Jiao completely, and he also grants allies a shield equal to percentage of their defense. For his ultimate, he removes status effects, deals AoE damage, and increases the cooldown of the targets in the AoE zone. And this ultimate is very interesting because it can even be used when Karma is incapacitated, meaning whether when he is frozen, when he is stunned, when he is mutated, when he is shocked. So it's very cool that it also cleanses those effects off him and allows him to immediately do damage. Basically, he can't really be incapacitated for too long. And yes, he is a top tier universal PvP hero even after 3 months, 4 months. Extremely flexible and useful skill set that can be used in variety of comps. You have your tank composition with Jave and Karin, or also used with Bai Jiao, Chris and Jave. So at this point in the meta, you need to remember that Ace is still very dominant in the meta, and they just released Jave as one of the counters to Ace to form a more defensive kind of meta, and Karma adds on to that. Okay, so he is more commonly used in defensive builds rather than offensive comps which use Ace and Rin. He also provides an alternative to heavy damage dealing comps and also goes against the Ace meta in fact. Okay, so he is someone that, you know, again as I mentioned, depends on your type of play. If you are someone that doesn't really like to use tanky builds, then maybe Karma won't be someone that you want to build out for, and maybe you could skip him. Again, he is a Legendary Plus hero, meaning he is definitely going to be a great unit to have. I mean, Legendary Plus heroes are all good to have, no doubt about that. It's just whether they suit your team or not. Okay, and whether you could build them up fast enough to fit that kind of team. After Karma, we have Orly, who is a range hero. For Orly, she does AoE damage on basic attacks and also has a chance to silence targets. Mainly her skill set is all AoE focused with straight line damage as well, and silence focused. Nothing too fanciful. Usually for CC units like this, they all have one signature status effect, and they also do additional damage to enemies who are dealt with that particular status effect. For her ultimate, she does do damage over time, where she summons this very big round zone, and yeah, it will just keep doing damage every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. So in PvP, she is kind of like a damage dealer in a tank composition, and also a secondary dealer in the Ace and Rin composition. And of course, with so many AoE skills, you can use her in Gold Vault as well. With Yon Heat, okay, those are possible. So while she is one of the better range heroes released and can be used alongside Rin, I think her launch was during a period where the meta is so heavily reliant on Karma and Ace compositions that, you know, she is completely not in the spotlight at all. So I would say she is a very likely skip. Next up we have Kagura. Kagura is actually a support hero, surprise surprise. Yes, so her passive is only in PvP, whereby she increases AoE damage received by the enemies. She also does AoE damage herself and decreases the attack of the enemies, and grants herself a shield. She also is able to heal all allies with a percentage of their max HP, also increase their crit damage. She also increases allies' attack speed and grants the ally with the highest attack a damage immunity effect. Finally, on her ultimate, she is able to cleanse status effects from all allies, restores the HP of the ally with the highest attack by a percentage of their max HP, and increase the ultimate skill gauge of all allies in PvP only. This ultimate skill can also be used when Kagura is incapacitated, which means she will be able to cleanse herself if she is hit with any status effects. So at first glance, you may think that she is a PvP exclusive unit, but actually there have been many people using her in PvE as an alternative to Alice. I won't say she is going to be better than Alice, in fact she is actually slightly inferior to Alice. Alice has a much longer lifespan in the meta compared to Kagura, but she is a potential support hero for more offense-based compositions, which use 2 tankers and 1 dealer. And particularly as Carl is released alongside her, they are also used together with 2 other heroes such as Karma, who also uses many AoE skills, so Kagura definitely helps there. However, overall she doesn't seem to be used as much as Karin and Alice. Okay, those 2 are the better PvP support heroes even after 2 months of Kagura's own release. Yeah. But I've seen her used in Guild Raid as a support unit, and it's kind of like a secondary option if you do not have Alice, because she heals allies based on their max HP. So it is pretty good because regardless of what stats she has, she can heal very well. And furthermore, you can use her ultimate when she is incapacitated, which means you don't have to have her at a very high level in that case for better heals, and you may probably don't even need her to be on HP armor for better heals. So you can actually focus using skill cooldown on her so that your team gets more heals over time. And I think overall she is still a skip, okay, because there are better support units for sure, unless you really want to use a tank-based PvP team. Next up we have Carl. So you realize that we've been getting so many Legend Plus heroes in a very short amount of time. Yes, that will happen eventually. And Carl's skill set is extremely stacked. Very long, so bear with me. Every 3rd basic attack, Carl will deal AoE fixed damage to all targets. He will also deal additional damage for each stigma on the target, and increase his own attack speed proportional to the crit rate he has. For his skill 1, he will deal fan shape defense ignoring AoE damage and apply stigma. He has a combo skill whereby he will do the same thing, but instead apply additional damage based on each stigma on the enemy, and he also applies stealth on himself when the target is killed. So in this case, for Carl's stealth, he cannot be targeted, yes, but he reduces AoE damage received, which means it's not completely immunity like what Rin has, and he also increases his resistances against all status effects. And this stealth effect actually happens for all his skills. So no matter what Carl does, as long as he kills an enemy using a skill, he will have the stealth effect, which means he has his own form of sustain. Like skill 2, he does AoE damage and deals additional damage based on the stigma. For skill 3, he teleports to the target and deals AoE damage as well, removes buffs, and applies the stigma. His ultimate is basically a combination of all his skills, whereby he will teleport, he will deal huge single target damage, he will apply stigma, he will also deal additional damage based on each stigma. So yes, everything that he has. He is purely a PvP unit because stigma does not apply to the PvE bosses, and in this case, he is the best DPS released alongside Espada and Ming. Okay, highly usable in the tactical formation as the DPS alongside Karma and Jave to have a bulky yet damage dealing team, and also usable with Ace and Rin compositions as well. And I think he is a great game changing unit with insane damage capabilities, and I would recommend pulling for yet another very flexible Legendary Plus hero for sure. Next up we have Taka, Teo's adopted son. Overall, Taka is going to be a support unit. Okay, he increases allies ignore defense efficiency, he charges the target and deals single target damage, and increases the damage the target receives. This is something similar to Rachel and Legendary Chris. He also deals single target damage and does additional damage for bleeding debuffs. Okay, his skill 3 increases ally single target damage. So as you can see, he is definitely a support role for the main dealer, even though he himself can do very heavy single target damage as you see from his ultimate. Okay, it causes bleed and also does additional damage for each bleed debuff on the enemy. So to refresh your memory, bleed is basically losing 1% of your HP every 5 seconds for 20 seconds and can be stacked up to 5 times. Even though he is seemingly a PvE support unit, I think he can be also used in lower tier PvP. He is not a must-have for sure, good to have for guild raid, okay, but definitely not a must-have, and you can probably skip as well. And following that, we have one of the biggest updates in Seven Knights 2 history, and that is the release of Orochi Kagura and Tyo. Orochi Kagura has a very unique kind of skill, whereby she has Berserk after her HP falls below 50%. I'm sure many people are familiar with the concept of Berserk. Berserk basically increases whatever attack stat and also cleanses the debuffs of that particular hero. And in PvP, every 2 basic attacks will allow her to poison the target as well. She also teleports to the target and deals AoE damage and poisons in her skill 1. And in PvP, she will do additional damage per poison debuff. Same thing when she is berserked. When she is in her berserk mode, she will also do additional damage, okay, for each poison debuff. So this could be a potentially hard hitting skill. In skill 2, she does AoE damage and poisons. In PvP, same thing, she deals additional damage based on each poison debuff. In berserk mode, she has the chance to also knock back. These berserk effects are additional effects, okay, to the skill, and they are not completely changing the skill at all. They are just buffing Orochi Kagura when she uses that skill. For her skill 3, she does AoE damage and restores her HP by a percentage of the damage dealt. Same thing, same effects. For her ultimate, she does AoE defense ignoring damage, poisons them, and also deals additional damage for each poison debuff. She doesn't seem to be highly ranked in the meta, possibly overshadowed by Tyo. Even though she has some utility in PvP, she needs to be below 50% HP to truly shine, and how that can be sustained is a very big question, considering how enemies could potentially two or three shot her, okay. But yeah, maybe she is ran in a CC com with Espada, even though the poison itself is a very standalone status since there is barely any other hero with that effect to pair well with her. So if she is used, she will most likely need sustain, and also that means sacrificing other potentially strong heroes like Ace and Tyo just to fit her in. And so I don't think she is a must-have and is most likely a skip as well unless you are a Kagura fan. Finally, the hero that everyone has been waiting for and everyone loves, and that is Tyo. Tyo is just insane. I mean, again, he is another hero which I don't even have to talk about the skill set. You just pull for him, you know? Tyo is just that kind of hero that you just want to pull for him and own him, right? Own a copy of him. For Tyo, when his HP falls below 10%, he becomes immortal and immune to buff removal. This is a new thing, which means you cannot remove his immortality, which means he does become immortal guaranteed, okay? And in this state, he also increases his ultimate gauge, charges it. In his skill 1, he does semi-circle AoE damage, reduces the defense of the targets, and has a chance to shock, and also allows him to ignore formation effects for the entire battle. So this is a very, very crazy skill, okay? And that is why he is a legendary plus hero. For his skill 2, he becomes unstoppable, charges at the target and deals straight line defense ignoring damage, and he also grants a shield based on the percentage of his attack. He also increases his hit probability, and in PvP resets skill cooldown if he kills a target with this skill. A lot of effects stacked into one skill. I mean, legendary plus heroes are just crazy good compared to all the legend heroes in terms of how much they have in one particular skill, if you realize. For his skill 3, he teleports to the target and deals AoE damage, remove buffs, has a combo skill which allows him to do even heavier damage. Finally, for his ultimate, he becomes invincible, summons a 6-meter zone that decreases enemies' defense, attack speed, movement speed, and he resets all his cooldowns. And furthermore, this is a suppression skill. Okay, so he definitely has PvE utility, whereby he will be used in the Orochi raid. The Orochi raid also brings about a brand new gear set that increases combo chance and basic attack damage. He is definitely one of the most powerful PvP heroes and has flexible utility being a universal hero. He's able to hold his own ground with tons of cooldown resetting and also has CC, buff removal, to complement other team compositions as well. And I mean, again, he is Teo. It really isn't a choice at this point. So yes, must summon. The last two heroes are heroes that have been released just very recent, and it's Cheng. Legend Cheng. Legend Cheng increases all allies' attack. She also charges the target and does straight line damage, has a chance to knock back. Using her combo skill, she does AoE damage, has a chance to taunt, and also applies a shield to herself based on her percentage of her attack, and this shield cannot be removed. She also teleports to the target and deals single target damage, silences and converts the enemy's HP to 45%. For her skill 3, she grants all allies outgauge reduction immunity. I'm not too sure whether this is something that is important in the Orochi raid or not, okay, but she also increases allies crit damage, so she does have some support capabilities. For her ultimate, she becomes unstoppable, teleports to the target and converts HP as well. This is the same ultimate as Lee. It also is a suppression skill and is used in the Orochi raid. So it's only been about 2 weeks since she was released, so it's very difficult to determine how long term she is going to be in the meta. But seeing that she is also used as an Orochi suppressor, she may not be needed if you have Teo. But that said, yes, I'm not sure about Orochi's actual skill set, so the out reduction immunity could come in handy in the raid, and having crit damage increase is also very good for all sorts of PvE content or the Orochi raid for that matter. And at the current state, Cheng is used very well alongside Ace, Rin and Teo as an alternative to Karma, so she's definitely not a bad PvP hero to use, but I'm not too sure at this point about the lifespan of her. The same thing can be said for the very recently released Nia. Okay, I'm not too sure how long she will be in the meta, but here's her skill set. She increases her own shock accuracy. She also deals AoE damage, reduces the target's shock resistance, grants allies an unremovable charging effect. So the charging effect basically will allow allies to also deal additional damage to shock targets. And being a shock based hero, she also has a chance to shock. For her skill 3, she grants a reflect shield to all allies based on the percentage of her attack, and also removes status effects. So I think the idea of having a reflect shield is just incredibly insane, and especially since if you have played chapter 10, you will know how annoying reflect is. So having reflect in the PvP setting, I think it could be potentially very strong. For her ultimate as well, she becomes unstoppable and does straight line damage, has a chance to shock enemies, and also grants allies the unremovable charging effect, which allows them to deal even greater damage to shock targets and reduces their shock resistance. There we go. So based on my own reading and analysis, I think Nia will become yet another top tier universal hero. Her ally buffs and shields are actually pretty disgusting with a complete reflect effect, and also causing a lot of CC while buffing the ally damage against shock targets as well. So she pairs very well with Teo, who is already part of the meta because he also has a chance to apply shock. And of course, Fodina Eileen is one of the other units that comes to mind when we have to talk about shock as well. So at this point, it is very worth noting that the Ace meta is almost dead at this point. Yes, I mean people still use him, but he is counted so heavily 6 months after his release, okay, with so many other powerful meta heroes. So this is currently what Korea players are dealing with in the meta with Karl, Karma, Jave, and Teo, and Rin. Basically, these are the 5 big units. Of course, Ace is also one of the most powerful units released in 7 Nights 2. So yes, we have come to the end of this video with over 37 heroes covered all the way up to Nia, who was released last week in Korea server. Let me know who are the heroes that you really want to pull for in the comments, and I would love to hear your opinions about their skill sets, about their design, about who you like, everything that came to your mind when watching this video. Okay, and big shout out to my channel members Yamaki, Reggie, Fahas, Tom and Christopher for their support. Stay tuned for more videos. Thank you so much and see you!